I'd like to get started with you on today's show, which is going to be, give me just a second, and I'm going to share some slides with you. The slides are kind of going to give us like a pathway to follow. I'll be going in and out of the slides. You can kind of see like the main point, the main topic that we're talking about. And then I'm going to give you a lot of awesome inside information. And our goal here is really how to achieve optimal fitness after the age of 50, right? And that it's different. It is quite a bit different than when you're in your teens and 20s, as you know very well, right? So with that being said, let's get started with today's show and the actual presentation. What are we talking about? We're talking about achieving optimal fitness after 50. And so what's your goal? What's your goal? That's the first thing. Like, because achieving optimal fitness means different things to everybody. For one person, it might be running a marathon, or for another person, it might be, feeling good while playing with the kids or grandkids, right? So go ahead and enter into the chat now. What's your goal? What are your goals? What's important to you? To live a pain-free life, to move pain-free, vibrant and endless energy, walk without pain, great mobility, awesome, strength and breathing, keep up with the kids, numerous health situations, now pretty strong, sarcopenia, not sure if I even can rebuild muscle. Absolutely you can, and I'll show you the way. So absolutely, to be able to keep exercising without getting injured. Brilliant, Mike, stud. Lose weight, be flexible, and be able to travel and enjoy everything that has to offer. Stay strong and independent, keeping body working. Staying healthy, more muscle tone, continued vitality and quality of life as we age. So please keep sharing, because I'll look at these notes after the session as well. But let's move forward. So my goal is to touch on all of those subjects that you just shared with me in terms of your goals, your objectives, what you'd like to do, what you see as really, it's like what you see as thriving in terms of your physical body, and even potentially mentally, emotionally, and like their whole physical state of life, right? So 30 years of science and R&D made simple. That's my goal here. Is I could share with you a lot of research, and we could dig into that stuff. And I'm going to share some research, but I'm going to try to do it more in a story format, keep it a little more interesting. And then at the end, I'm going to make it really applicable. But moving forward, we need to basically, here's my philosophy is I look at everything in life when we're trying to achieve results as what we call the Pareto Principle. Now, if you're not already familiar with the Pareto Principle says that 20% of what you do produces 80% of the results. In other words, 20% of our VIPs have the greatest level, for example, of attendance and activity in their sessions and that type of thing. And no matter what you look at, 20% is typically producing 80% of the results. And so with exercise, it's no different. So what I aim for you today is to give you the kind of that secret sauce of like, well, where's the 20% at that's going to give you the very best results? And also where the stumbling blocks and hurdles that the fitness industry really sets you up for failure and helping you to prevent that of being affecting you in a negative way. So first of all, what do most people do, right? Most people, what they do is they train to what they can do. Right? Most people train to what they can do. So if you think about it, if you think about fitness and exercise, then what most people do is they'll go to the gym or they'll do whatever exercise format. And if they can do 10 push-ups, they'll do 10 push-ups. If they can run a mile, they'll run a mile. But, and then, looking at all the different things you can achieve with fitness, there's muscle gain, there's aerobic fitness and conditioning, there's your mobility. And really, we need to do all of these things to achieve the very best results, right? We need to do all of those things to achieve the very best results in terms of achieving all of those goals that you shared with me. So training to what you can do. So first of all, basically for all of your goals, muscle gain or strength should be part of that, especially those of you who shared anything like sarcopenia or loss of muscle, or wanting to stay strong and functional as we age. Muscle gain and strength is extremely important. It's a very, very important factor. But let's look at that. Like how should we go after muscle gain and strength? So with this, I'd like to tell you a couple of really interesting examples. So for example, one of the strongest, most muscle-bound people in the last couple of decades, Ronnie Coleman, for example, okay, he's a champion, 6-time Mr. Olympia. He actually was squatting 900 pounds. The guy weighed 300 pounds. So here's an example of someone who had extreme, amazing strength and muscle. And now Ronnie Coleman walks with crutches. Ronnie Coleman has to use a walker to walk because of the type of strength training he's done. He's an individual who's developed the most elite level of strength and muscle gain, and so much so that he put himself into a paralyzed situation. Then we have individuals like past power lifters who have given themselves a stroke because they've done so much strength training in lack of ratio, okay, lack of balance to aerobic training, that they actually gave themselves a stroke and also almost in a paralyzed kind of position. Now let's bring down the extreme examples. Those individuals who focus so heavily on strength training that it's always about lifting more load or having more performance, it's extremely common for, in fact, I don't really know many that have done that for years. I can't really think of any examples that have done that for years and don't have some serious level of joint degeneration or joint pain, joint issues, tissue tears, all kinds of stuff, right? It's so going after the pursuit of muscle gain and strength, it can definitely be quite deleterious. In other words, downgrading to your health, right? But you need that. You need to gain muscle and you need to gain strength. And at least if you're already very strong or you have a lot of muscle, we want to maintain that as you age. So we're first going to look at the problem areas and give you some examples of those. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go in and look at aerobic fitness and conditioning. Now, here's a really interesting thing for you. In terms of aerobic fitness and conditioning, they did a study on 46,000 subjects over the course of 20 years. And what they looked at is how many miles these individuals ran per week. And now we're talking about running, but you can take running and you can convert that to other forms of exercise with the same types of intensity and stimulus. But for this example, running, amazing study, 20 years, 46,000 subjects. What they looked at is how the benefits of the running, how much benefits did their body get from running, right? And up to what level of miles, and what they, in science, what they call of all cause morbidity. In other words, all things that cause your body to kind of break down and make you lose function and stuff, for all of those causes, what was the benefits? And what they found is up to about 10 miles, we really started getting optimal results in this whole massive group, right? And the group's big enough that you can really see like, well, how would it almost affect you? Because there's so many humans looked at, there's high probability that you're going to fall somewhere in this group. Then what they found is, so 10 miles started doing really amazing. 15 miles is where we started getting like peak results. Okay. And then what we found is, and so they had significant decreases in terms of other study groups who didn't do this running. So what they found is by mile 20, when people started pushing towards mile 20 in a week, then they started getting loss of health, loss of body function. And why is that? And the reason why that is because exercise is damage to your body. We want this damage. It's a healthy breakdown. You literally, like when we strength train, for example, in the Ronnie Coleman example, you're literally tearing your tissues apart microscopically, ideally not macroscopically. So microscopically, you're breaking down your body in the form of aerobic conditioning. And then there's an inflammatory effect that comes from that, which can be somewhat of a good thing. Inflammation isn't always bad. We want some because that helps create cellular breakdown. That's the stimulus for us to come back from. But what I'm starting to get the point across to you here is that exercise is breakdown to your body. Exercise causes inflammation. Exercise causes a fatigue, an element of stress. And that's why it's so effective. We're going to get to why it's so effective. We're going to talk a lot about the positives. This part of my talk with you today is pretty negative, but we're going to get to the positive part and what is the best outcomes. We're going to get there. In terms of aerobic conditioning, what happens is you get oxidative stress to your body. So just like when you bite into an apple and you leave it on the counter and it turns brown, basically that same kind of thing happens in your body. So you have oxidation in your body that causes cellular breakdown, and it can cause inflammation. It can cause your cells basically to break down in excess if you're doing too much aerobic training at the level that it doesn't have time to regenerate sufficiently. And then you're causing a lot of stress on what your body calls genetic replication. In other words, its ability to grow new cells and develop and have those cells thriving, because you're doing too much of the breakdown stimulus. So one of the things that was shown quite heavily in this running study was people would have atrial fibrillation. So the heart cells, some of the heart cells that actually having excess breakdown and not have the ability to come back and recover fast enough with the amount of stimulus that the individual is placing on it. And before we go forward, one more thing that's really interesting to note about this, as I dug deeper into this research, those individuals running 20 miles plus, they're also pretty type A, pretty intense, more individuals. So they tend to have like an excessive driver type of mentality. So like the Ronnie Coleman individual, the powerlifter individual, the people who are running over 20 miles a week, they're trying to push their body pretty significant amounts, right? But most of us would think about it from the surface with, oh yeah, this person's really fit, they're able to do this, they have this appearance. So most humans look at the fit population and this fittest population and think, wow, they're really amazed, they're perfect. And no, oftentimes they actually have a lot of injuries, they have a lot of issues, they have a lot of excessive breakdown because exercise is damage and degenerative to your body. But most fitness professionals don't talk that much about the breakdown of your body. But when we start to look at that differently, then we can change getting the most positive results. So now let's go back in here and let's talk about the next type of fitness results. And we do want aerobic conditioning, and we're going to get there, right? We do want that, but we have to, and I'll share with you the way you should look at that. So we should do all these things. You want to gain muscle, you want to gain strength, you want to gain aerobic fitness and conditioning. Absolutely. We've got to do that to make you a thriving human to the age 100 and beyond. And fix joint pain and all those things. It's reliant upon these last two categories. But there's a specific way that we should look at that. And remember, right now we're looking at exercise is what you can do, because most people go at exercise and what you can do. Oh, my body's able to do that, so let me do that, right? So stretching and yoga, or AKA mobility training. Now with stretching and yoga, great forms of exercise, by the way, awesome. I do those on a daily basis, and I advise our VIPs to do those on a daily basis. But where does stretching and yoga and all this stuff, where does it go wrong, right? What can be wrong with that? Well, when we're stretching our bodies so much that we're not really targeting the tissues where you have the greatest level of restriction, basically what happens is you're working on two things. One thing is when you're not targeting where you have tissue restrictions. In other words, for example, like if the front side of your hips, let's use you as an example, if the front side of your hips are really tight, but in your yoga or stretching session, you stretch a lot of the back side of your hips, just because you don't really know what level of degrees and how much mobility you should actually have, and they just kind of feel tight. Well, the pulling on one side of your body could be giving you the sensation on that. So how do you know, like, what is the actual degrees that the tissue should have? And so what happens oftentimes is individuals will misalign their body while doing stretching because they're targeting tissues that are already mobile enough and not focusing on the areas that have greatest restriction. And the only way to really know that is to actually measure these things. So that's one thing that happens. So actually can increase misalignments with doing stretching. The other thing that happens is when you get more mobile, you get less stability. Because when something has greater mobility, you lose stability, right? Like any great piece of machinery, the more mobility it has, the greater stability it needs to have. Not a lot of motion, then you don't need as much stability. But once you start getting a lot of motion, you have a lot of room for tweaks and twists and that type of thing. So when you go after mobility training, if you're focusing so much on increasing range of motion and you're not putting strength and proper types of strength and aligned strength in that new range of motion, this can cause your body to get joint stress, joint damage, excessive tissue breakdown, tissue tears, pain, injury, all these type of things that absolutely will prevent us from achieving the greatest fitness after the age of 50. Now going back in, we're looking at what is the percentage, right? What is the, so what is the percentage of non-contact injury in NFL and pro sports? Now, many of you who have been our VIPs, you already know the answer to this question. And actually Patricia gave part of it away there in the opener of today's show. But let's think about function, because we're thinking about like, I would like to function like an athlete. I'm sure you would like to, if you're 50, 60, 70, 80 years old and you're functioning like an athlete, that's a great thing. And it's true, it is a great thing. But because it's functional, it's not just strength, it's not just aerobic, it's this overall balance of amazing capability. But even they run into problems. So, many of you already know the answer. So for those of you who don't know that already know the answer, don't give it away. But if this is the first time you're hearing this question from me, what percentage of non-contact injury do you think exists in the NFL, for example? So National Football League, NFL, professional football, big behemoth guys running around, hitting each other, full contact sport. You would think that the non-contact injuries would be very small because there's so much contact. You're hitting each other, they're going to get injured. So what percentage do you think, and you can write this in the chat if you like, what percentage of injury in the NFL do you think is non-contact? Again, those of you who are the first time you're hearing me ask this question, go ahead and write in the chat. So what percentage of injury do you think in the NFL is non-contact? More than contact. Okay, that's a good start. Over 50%, 45. Yeah, and those are, and I'm kind of leading you into it too, right? So the numbers go up, but it's actually 10%. Yeah, and without my lead in of like, hey, athletes and people are getting injured, we're going to think that it's a small percentage. Like Jen's guess, like that's, if I didn't know this stuff, that's what I would guess. It would make sense. It's actually 67%. 67% of the injuries in the NFL are non-contact. So they have the best trainers, the best physical therapists, like the best team, ortho docs, all this stuff. And in pro sports overall, it's 66%. In the NFL, it's actually 67%. So, the question in your head should be, well, why? Like, what's going on with fitness and body training that people are getting injured at these high rates when they're these elite level athletes, right? And I'm going to get to the answer of all of this. It's coming up. Let's look at hiring a trainer. Well, why don't we just hire trainers to help us figure all this stuff out? And that would be amazing. That they'll just kind of figure all this stuff out for us and put us in the right place. Now, there are some amazing trainers, and my team and I are not the only great trainers in the world. But in general, you have to be really, really careful who you hire as a trainer, because there is injury rates proven by research to be as high as 73% of the individuals in high intensity training programs, for example, that get injured from training, right? So it's also, even with trainers, that can be an issue, right? So going forward, so what about just going easy and taking a soft approach and doing a little bit of this stuff and dabbling in all these things, and then we won't be subjected with the excess damage and all that stuff? Well, depending on how soft you go, you may not get much results at all, or very minimal results, and then you're not going to move forward. You're not going to achieve your goals, and we're not going to live to 120 with this amazing function and all this stuff, because unless you're just a genetic freak, or in other words, a genetic anomaly, right? A rare 0.5% of the population that actually works for, without really having to take much care of yourself. But just going easy and taking a soft approach, it doesn't produce enough results. So what's missing, right? So those are all the things that we're up against. What's missing in terms of going after this? And I know each and every one of you at some point feels this, because when you're trying to go after strength or go after aerobic conditioning, your knee doesn't work the way you want it to, your shoulder doesn't work, or there's all kinds of pain and different inflammation things you feel, or Or maybe you're an individual that, you don't really have much of this stuff going on, which is awesome, but you want to make sure that you don't, because you know that you're consistent with fitness, you're doing great. So you want to stay away from this breakdown. So as you get another 10, 20, 30 years older, you're able to keep a great functional body and have the very best second half of your life possible. Right? So that would be the goal for you. So what's missing? What's missing in this whole fitness process? And what should you do? Like, what should you do about this? So the secret really is, remember before this, when we were way back here, before all this stuff, before we went all through all these areas, it was training to what you can do. And now we're looking at training to adaptation. So the secret is training to adaptation, eliminating negative results from your fitness process and making it all positive. But how do you do that? So the secret is training to adaptation and eliminating negative results from your fitness process and making it all positive. How do we do that? Well, first, we need to understand your body's adaptation to different types of physical workload potential. So if we look at this graph and we look at, here is like the total level of intensity. Now, I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible, because what we're going to look at in the bottom bar here, okay, so along the, sorry, my microphone cut out there for a second. What we're looking at for the horizontal axis here, okay, is how much fatigue. In other words, how much output. So this could be compared for running, doing aerobic activity, riding a bike, elliptical. It could be lifting weights for an hour. It could be one set of lifting weights. It's very, very, very broad, the way that we could apply this. It basically gets compared and applied to any type of workload, okay? And this is something that's crucial for you to understand if you want amazing results after 50. This is one very pivotal element, and my hope is to create great clarity for you in the next few minutes on what I'm sharing here. All right, so, and then on this side, okay, so on this y-axis here, we're looking at how much results. Kind of arbitrary, okay, but like, let's think about a results as like a muscle gain, additional energy, tissue strengthening so they don't break down and feel weak as easily, regenerating your tissues, and functional health so you don't have pain and stiffness anymore, how good you feel when you get out of bed in the morning because your body's now functioning so well, it's not taking excessive abuse. Like, this side is all those kind of results. You name it. What's the kind of results you want? You name it. This is like how much of that type of result on a 1 to 15 scale, okay? This side is how hard you're working. This side is how much you're doing, okay? So let's take a specific example now. Performance capacity. Performance capacity, if we were to look at like doing 7 push-ups. Let's say you could do 7 and about a half push-up. You fall to the ground on the 7 and a half push-up. So that would be your performance capacity, okay? And then here would be your adaptation. In other words, 2.5 push-ups, if you only did 2.5 push-ups, right, would be the level that your body is adapted to. In other words, if you do 2.5 push-ups, you're not going to really create, especially if you do them correctly, you're not going to create any joint pain or additional tissue breakdown. Your cells aren't going to break down. Your body's not going to have enough fatigue or stimulus to really have any kind of result happen, because it's totally adapted to it. It has resistance to fatigue here. And here's the goal. Here's the big takeaway. And I'm going to get back into giving you even more information there. Exercise is breakdown. Exercise is a degenerative stimulus. So the benefit of that is basically what you're doing when you exercise is you're developing ability to resist fatigue. You're developing ability in your muscles to add more load and do more by the stimulus of breaking down the tissue. By the stimulus of having stress placed on your body gets better at resisting that stress, of not allowing that thing to affect you. So now when you want to go play with the kids, grandkids, or hike a mountain and do all these activities, the more fit you are, the less you feel fatigued from that, because your body's adapted from all that degenerative stimulus and breakdown, right? And that's the goal. That's what exercise does. So if you want strength, you do strength and you get better at strength. If you want more aerobic conditioning, you do, or fitness or energy and endurance, you do more aerobic activity. Why? Because you're using that specific stimulus to get better at that specific type of stress. If you want to have a more mobile joint, you stretch the specific tissues for that area. Why? Because that stress is allowing the tissue to respond and get into longer positions, right? So that's the goal. It's stress and breakdown. Now let's go further. Now let's really look at this. Okay, so what we've learned is this: is exercise starts with a negative result, a net negative result. We need breakdown first. We're not going to have any positive results if we don't first have a negative. You want to have breakdown. You want your muscle to have some burning. You want to have some fatigue. You want to have a little bit of stress in the tissue when you stretch, right? You want to have that because you need some level of breakdown to your body, fatigue stimulus, because that's what goes first. Okay, so this red line represents that as we go forward in workload, which remember can be applied to anything, can be applied to anything. It can be doing like our VIPs learn, rolling on the roller. If you roll on the roller for an hour and you do the most intense positions, you're going to be way over here and overtrain your tissue with that, right? You could overtrain your tissue with aerobic, actually with strength training, with really any type of training. So what we're seeing is we get this tiny little bit of fatigue stimulus coming up to adaptation. So you can, again, you can look at this as any type of activity. It could be walking or running a mile, it could be doing your 7.5 push-ups, it could be an hour-long workout, but just think that here, you're about 1/3 of what you can do. So the performance capacity would be the can do, right? And the fatigue state, by the way, if you're wondering what that is, that's when you could do 10 push-ups and you go to fatigue and you do it again and you do it again. You're just going so much further past your performance capacity that everything you do beyond that point is just a level of body breakdown. You're past your level of performance capacity. You won't be able to perform at the level you did up to this point. So the first thing you're going to have is net negative results. Okay, so net negative results, that's the first thing. And what you're seeing is that as you start getting to that performance capacity, you really peak in the negative results. That's pain, stiffness, that's joint inflammation, that's injuring your body. It's all the stuff that you can think of that would be like the kind of results that are negative from exercise. Okay, next, the cool part comes, right? The part we're really after, and that is the net positive results. So as a beginner, right, and we're looking at a beginner, I'm going to show you intermediate and advanced too. So again, this can be applied to anything. Okay, so in other words, the individual that's a beginner in strength training and they've only done 0 to 6 months of strength training. Okay, that's the beginner, or an aerobic exercise, or in stretching. It could be applied to any of those categories. So beginner continuous exercise experience anywhere from about 0 to 6 months. Okay, and then we looked at negative, we understood what this is. Now we're looking at positive. So what our goal is to optimize our positive results. So what you're seeing is by the time as a beginner, you start doing what you can do, you're way over here in negative results. Your positive results are actually starting to taper down. So guess what I just gave you in simple terms? I just gave you an incredibly intelligent, worthwhile, very purposeful excuse. And excuse isn't really the best word, but we'll use that, to not push yourself when you start exercising. That's what everybody does, and that's what you shouldn't do. You should not. Why? Because you need breakdown to get results. And when you're a beginner, as soon as you start getting this breakdown building up, you get positive results very fast. So I wish I was a beginner sometimes, because I wouldn't have to push really that much for additional results. It's very easy to get great results. So if you want to push and get additional aerobic results or strength training results, your goal, this is why I always teach our VIPs, 10% past your comfortable. This is about 10% past your comfortable. in this zone, right? Especially as you build a mental adaptation exercise. In other words, let me make it really simple now. Think about, for any type of exercise you're doing, what's the most amount you think you could do before you really start feeling like your body's going to an excess breakdown? Well, you only have to do about half of that, okay, to get the very best results. It's a very important thing to understand, and it's a concept I feel that in exercise, people just don't approach it that way. They're always thinking about what I can do and over here, and then wondering why they always have all this pain and stiffness and dysfunction. It's because they're not focusing on adaptation. It has to do with what is your body used to, and then what do you need to do to get those results. If intermediate is an individual who's doing that type of exercise for 6 to 18 months. And now look at that. That is the fitness effect. Let's go back. We went from 7.5 performance capacity, 2.5 with adaptation, and just staying in the game, staying comfortable, not having to crush your body with exercise, staying comfortable in the zone here. We get massive results, and we get to where we're at 6 to 18 months. And of course, it changes along the scale. It's kind of taking an average snapshot from beginner to now intermediate. And now look at this. So we get these positive results so much earlier, because now we get all these positive results from playing with where our adaptation used to be and maintaining the results, right? So from going from a beginner to an intermediate exerciser, the health effects are gigantic, huge, huge, huge. Going from intermediate to advanced, not so much. If you're pretty fit, your results from fitness and health are going to be huge. Going from that to an Olympic athlete, actually probably lead to your health breakdown, not additional health, overusing the body. So we have this 3 acts, right? Improvement in our adaptation. What just happened? When you do that kind of exercise, you train an adaptation, now your body is so much more resistant to fatigue. It gets fatigued less, it has more strength, you can do more strength type, aerobic type activity, all these activities, and not break down as easily. So the big takeaway here is go with about 50% effort as a beginner, but stay ridiculously consistent. That's the hard part. Consistency will give you amazing results, because if you do this again and again and again and again and again, you're going to rack up your compound results, and then you end up here. And now you play the same game, except for what used to be hard doesn't feel so hard anymore. And now you can play the game like in this range, and you do again and again and again. And that's the secret. That's the way that you have amazing fitness well beyond 50, is thinking about that, knowing that if you really push yourself too far, you're going to start playing out here. Now, as we get into more intermediate and advanced, it does make sense as looking at this as volume. In other words, training over time, it does make sense to have some training over here once in a while. The same thing we're looking at is this spectrum is like where you adapted to in terms of doing a high intense workout once in a while. Well, we want a little bit of that stimulus once in a while. And for advanced, basically, you just go out a little bit further. You have even more resistance to fatigue. You get to get even more positive results before you start to go into that negative result line. So the secret to amazing fitness after 50 is training based on adaptation. And now you just learned quite a bit about training based on adaptation. And going back, everybody has their own graph, so to speak. Everyone looks a little different based on what they've been doing, based on different physiological and health factors. But to make it very easy, what can you do before you start getting major fatigue? Go about 50%. That's the big takeaway. Once you're intermediate, you can play that game a little bit further. You can feel more like you're at about a 70% workload roughly. And for our VIPs, this is kind of the whole thought process behind and the science behind your optimal physiological dosage. So for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, we have this thing called optimal physiological dosage, which tells you what is your low intensity, your moderate intensity, and your high intensity training zones, and how much you should do of each. And the reason why we do so much adaptation is because we're optimizing all those positive results with no negative impact. So the secret to amazing fitness after 50 is training based on adaptation, and biomechanical optimization would come next. And I'll explain to you what that is. So what biomechanical optimization is this. So most people train their body like Arnold Schwarzenegger days, mostly, which basically means like, well, a squat is good for developing your leg strength, so I'll squat, or this exercise is good for that muscle, so I'll do that. So they just basically focus on movements in terms of getting more performance from the movement, or using the equipment to move the equipment. I'm trying to keep the way that we think about this really simple, but that's basically what they do. It's basically what they do. It's not about the equipment though. It's about your body. So the way that the paradigm should change there is saying, what does my ankle need to do? What is the functionality of my ankle? It's a difficult question, but what is the functionality of my knee, my hip, my low back, my pelvis, my upper back, my shoulders, my neck? What is the functionality? What does it need to have to make me feel amazing and function and be free of pain and full of capability? What does it need to have? What are the mechanical properties of that human body part of yours? What does it need to have? That's the first thing. And in the full body fix event, and as VIPs, we take them through an entire training process doing exactly this. And then at full body fix event, we actually go foot and ankle and knee and hip. We teach you exactly this. So don't miss the full body fix. But that biomechanical optimization is stepping back and saying, okay, what is the ideal functionality of every body part? And then going through a neuromuscular retraining process, because unless you're like that 1% that's just body mechanics, biomechanics, or body mechanics, you can interchange those words. They mean the same thing. So to make it simpler, body mechanics. So the body mechanics are the way that they function, the way that your joints aligned, how much tissue range of motion you need on one side of your body versus the other, the strength ratios that you need to be able to hold your shoulder in the proper place, to be able to support your back so it doesn't have excessive degeneration, the way that your ankle should move so that it doesn't cause misalignments in other areas of your body. All of that is what we call biomechanical optimization. And it is a complicated subject, because it's different. There's some principles that are the same, but it's different for every joint of the body, what is required. So when you go through exercise, what you should always be doing after the age of 50 is focusing on your function. Because if you're always focusing on what is the functionality of each part of your body, then what happens is you always get a therapeutic effect if you're training to your adaptation or the right distance past your adaptation, so you're not overstressing your tissues. So the secret sauce is don't overstress your tissues. Focus on your body mechanics optimization by focusing on that and not trying to look at it as like, oh, how fast can I run a mile, or how much push-ups did I do, or how much sit-ups did I do? Do you really need to do another 10 sit-ups? Do you really need to do another 10 push-ups? How much is that going to help your functionality? Maybe that's going to cause detriment to your functionality, because if you can do 10 more push-ups, that's 10 more push-ups of strength on the front side of your upper body in ratio versus the back side of your upper body. And maybe that'll be the thing that puts you out of alignment and causes joint damage, right? So really the key is training to adaptation, and then also having, also focusing on biomechanical optimization. And then the next component, which we haven't really talked about yet, is utilizing both degenerative and regenerative stimulus. So what I want you to know about this is that we talked a lot about today is you have breakdown in the body from exercise, which is a great thing, right? That's where that negative result line and the positive line gets stimulated by how much negative we have, right? We want that, okay? So we want that stimulus, but remember, it's degenerative. So when you get past 50, right? And really the reality is, when I say you get past 50, teenagers in 20s and 30s should be doing this stuff too, based on their age and their adaptation to exercise, but they don't listen, as you all know. Usually they don't listen. There's some smart ones out there, but usually they got to live in a body for about 50 years. And then they start respecting the body, and what playing too much in that can do performance level creates breakdown, and then it all builds up and accumulates. So, you know, people around the age of 50 and over, they just listen a lot better. So what you want is when you have a degenerative stimulus, one amazing thing you can do, and it's really fun and makes exercise and physical activity really enjoyable, is match it with a regenerative stimulus. In other words, if you do a strength training session that gives you a little bit of muscle soreness and this kind of thing, a little bit of inflammation, which is a good thing, then we got to match it with doing something like a massage or cold therapy, and I'm going to show you a whole list of the way this works. So cold therapy, massage, light level exercise, which actually helps the higher level exercise stimulus that had degenerative effect on the body. This light level, like light aerobic activity, will help the tissues recover. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to match degenerative stimulus with regenerative stimulus. And the way you do that, and I have a whole list for you, and I can share the slides with you after the show today, is think about, well, what is regenerative stimulus, first of all, right? And so what if we could look at that as a hierarchy? In other words, what thing would give me only recovery? And really know we're playing way at that far line of the physical stimulus. You know how we got into the negative result line? Like, in other words, where do we start with the beginning of the line? And then where, as we go down with pushing our body, what does that look like? Because if you can understand what regenerative stimulus is, then you get to play in this playground of doing regenerative activity that makes you feel great, that makes your body recover. And if you recover well, then that degenerative stimulus will work even better for you. Okay, so I'm going to show you a list of how to think about that. And it's very important to not have, remember, it's important not to have too much of that degenerative stimulus, and also to match that regenerative stimulus. So here's the hierarchical scale of physical stimulus. In other words, where do you start with the regenerative stimulus that I was just talking about? And a very quick, actually, I'll come right back to this, but a very, very important point. That was the thing I was trying to think of and I was forgetting, is when you're, especially when you're over the age of 50, I'll tell you, this is one of those 30 years of science. I'll just give you the like what it all says. Basically, all the science and research shows, like studying millions of people on exercise and different outcomes, but when the individual takes longer than 72 hours to recover and they're over the age of 50, roughly, right? Could be, it's not necessarily the birth of 50 years old, birthday of 50 or now everything. No. It's around the age of 50, could be 45, 55, depending on your genetic, could be 60, but in this age range, okay? What happens is our body, because the cells are beginning to change and age, we get inflammatory effects from exercise easier. So that's the reason why I go so deep talking about all this adaptation stuff, is because your body is going to be triggered in a negative way easier than 30 years ago. So we want to make sure that stimulus is just adequate enough to get great results, but not push the negative envelope, because when you break down your cells in excess, then they'll come back and do things like this. For example, in strength training, if you do too intensive strength training and you take longer than 72 hours to recover from that bout of exercise, then oftentimes, not always, but often, what will happen is your cells will come back and develop fibrotic or scar tissue instead of new skeletal muscle. So what you want is new skeletal muscle or strengthened skeletal muscle. And I always do this with my fingers because the muscle attaches like this and it crawls over itself, right? This is the skeletal contractile fibers. That's why the way your muscles actually work. And you want more of these structures. That's what you want. You want to strength train. You want the nervous system to connect stronger, to turn on these structures easier, because not all muscles turn on, right? That's the other thing to know, is not all muscles turn on when you strength train. That's the other big factor of biomechanical optimization. Now I'm kind of getting off topic, but it's actually with the whole regen, degen, but this is really crucial stuff for you guys to know. So I'm going to go backwards, even though this is out of order. Biomechanical optimization, also really, really important. Think about this. So Ronnie Coleman, 900-pound squat, and some of the best strength people, like what are they doing? They're getting their nervous system to turn on more muscle fibers. Because when you strength train, if you lift 5 pounds or you row 5 pounds versus 40 pounds, what's the difference? Are you using the same amount of muscle to a lighter degree? Or are you actually turning on more muscle fibers? Are you actually using more of your muscle tissue? Are you actually positively affecting, creating that stimulus in more tissue when you lift more weight? And the answer is, you actually turn on more muscle fibers when you lift more weight, because the way tissues work in the nervous system's ability to turn on your muscle fibers has to do with something called an all or nothing. It has to do with all or nothing principle. So the all or nothing principle is turn on completely the nervous system's connection with the muscle fibers, or not at all. Let me say this differently and explain more. So you send the message from your brain through the spinal cord to your body, doing whatever activity you're doing. And when this message goes out, it goes through all these many vast array of nervous system connections, okay? Goes through the neurons, and the neurons, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of them. And what they're doing is when they get triggered, they're attached to muscle fibers and they turn on. So for example, if you do a curl, for a simple example, if you do a curl and you lift 5 pounds, motor units will get turned on only enough to lift 5 pounds. But when you lift 20 pounds, then what will happen is you'll turn on many more neurons attached to these fibers, and you're actually using more of your body, which is why it's so very important to gain strength. And when you gain strength, then more tissues, which have the tendon attaching to the bone, pull on the bone, and through something called Wolff's Law, it actually causes that bone and the osteoblast to form new bone density. So it's very important for you to get stronger. But if you do it in the wrong way, you're going to damage your joints. You're going to break down your body. If you don't respect adaptation, you're going to cause breakdown. So that's why if you focus on biomechanical optimization, you really think about it as a neurological process of having great body alignment. Then what we get to do is you don't always have to go more load. You can go more that you're holding your body so perfectly. You're holding your spine, your alignment, your shoulders, everything you're doing is so ingrained neurologically that you're firing the nervous system to turn on even more muscle fibers without only having to have more load. So that's part of our secret sauce also, is by focusing so much on that nervous system connection of perfect body alignment that we're actually getting more tissues to function, more tissues to turn on. And now we're getting a bigger effect without having to put excess load and stress on the body. Okay. With all that being said, let's finish out with regen and degeneration. So regeneration and degeneration stimulus. Remember, we're looking at what are the type of stimulus that cause more of just a regeneration in your body, and then getting into the degeneration. Okay, first, meditation. That simply means lay down, listen to something that's amazing for your breathing in through your nose, out through your nose, a relaxation. It could be music that you absolutely love, that's soft and euphoric. That's a form of meditation. It can be a guided meditation. YouTube has thousands and thousands of meditation. You can just go to YouTube on your phone. You can get all kinds of meditation. There's apps on the App Store on your phone. Just doing like 10-minute meditations is an amazing thing. Okay. An hour is better, but and it's regenerative, and it's the first on the list. So it's one of those things that, you know, if you do an hour, you're not going to have more breakdown. Right? That's one of the things that makes it first on the list. Then there's cryotherapy. Cryotherapy is basically going in the cold. There's actual cryotherapy chambers with cold gas. There's going into cold pools. And then contrast shower would be the next one for regenerative. So these are all things you can do to make yourself feel awesome and help recover from any type of physical activity. The contrast shower is simply, you get in the shower and you go within reason, the hottest water you can stand, and let your body heat up, get nice and warm. Patricia's amazing at, she's able to take a shower at a level that I can't imagine. It's like how you're not going to burn your skin. So be careful with that, but you can go into warm, hot shower. You can do this in a pool as well. It doesn't have to just be a shower. And then you go into colder water. And what this does is it creates vasodilation with the hot, and then vasoconstriction with the cold. In other words, you get more blood flow with the hot, and then you constrict and you get a shunt of all the waste product from your tissues. So if you have excessive soreness and that type of thing, one of the most amazing things is to do a contrast shower. Relaxation massage would be the next on the regenerative list, which just means a nice, easy Swedish type massage. You could do that. You could do self-applied massage as well. So you can do things like rolling, but with very light rolling type of positions, like with the foam roller or ball, but also any type of just very relaxing massage. Next on the list would be light, moderate, passive stretching. Passive stretching is where you don't really have to actively move your body. So that's typically where you're using a band or something to move your leg instead of trying to go into the stretch. Also, this could be someone stretching you in a very light way. And one thing that's really great is you think about these. What if you do meditation and a contrast shower and light stretching all together? Oh, there you go. Now you're starting to create a workout, so to speak, of regenerative activities. More secret sauce for you. So blood flow manual therapy, tissue regeneration. This is where you're getting a little bit more intense with this massage, right? This was like a super easy. This is where we're starting to get more intense with massage. Thermotherapy is simply like heat. So instead of going in the cold, you go in the warm with the vasodilation. That will help. Low intensity, zone 1 dynamic aerobic exercise. This is basically saying doing light, easy activity for a sustained period of time that includes motion. That's what all this says. And it's great to do in water. Awesome. You know, like when you go in the pool this summer, going into towards the end of May, you're gonna all start getting in pool. Ideally, go do just light moving. You don't have to be a swimmer. Just go in and walk and move your arms and move around continuously. That's an amazing regenerative type of exercise. Dynamic stretching with low difficulty. Dynamic stretching is simply just stretching with motion. So you move, it's like flowing into different motions instead of holding the stretch. Thermotherapy with active static stretching. This is where you go into warm, like stretching in a jacuzzi, for example. That would be a perfect example of this. Or anywhere where it's warm. Anywhere it's warm and you're doing stretches that you hold. Low exertion, low mechanical stress, BFR. BFR is a whole subject in itself. I'll explain it simply. Blood flow restriction is a way that you cut off part of the circulation. So you put like a band on your upper arm or on your upper leg. And by decreasing blood flow to the limb, you want to be very careful with this. You want to make sure you don't have any blood flow issues. Check with your doctor. But an amazing type of strength training to get more results and be regenerative is you use a blood flow restriction on the upper limb, upper leg. And you get some of the results of heavier strength training while doing very light exercise. Aerobic zone 1, this means that you're doing a continuous aerobic type of exercise where it feels like you're spending about 40% effort, basically. And then the next, intense, thorough, deep tissue and pressure point manual therapy. Now we're getting into where it's like the massage that hurts, but it feels good, because it's rough, but the person knows what they're doing, right? They don't end up injuring or doing something goofy. So that would be this last one before we started getting into the degenerative stimulus. And then I'll quickly go through this list, and then I'm going to turn over to your questions. So please get ready, especially VIPs first with your questions. I will go through the chat. Any ambiguities I've created, any doubts, confusions, I'm going to create all clarity before we end today's session. Degenerate, and then anything that you'd like to know more about. Okay, so now as we get into degenerative stimulus, so what's the first item on the list in terms of thinking about what is an activity I can do that's very light and easy? And also this is a great way to look at, like, if you're having problem areas with certain parts of your body, like a knee pain, or what should you do first? So for example, like you could use all regenerative type of therapy for that area of your body, and then you start leading into the lower levels of the degenerative. So I just gave you more secret sauce right there, which is you start with this type of activity. And as you do that type of activity, the tissues start to respond, you start to get healthier, and then you can slowly start to build up in the degenerative stimulus. And it's a good idea to do a ratio of where you do some from the degenerative and then some from the regenerative throughout the week. Okay, so the first item on the list is dynamic stretching with moderate difficulty. So now we're doing stretching that's a little bit more vigorous, nothing crazy, but a little bit more vigorous mobility exercise. Now we're getting into aerobic zone 1 and 2. In other words, moderate intensity aerobic activity, something that feels about like 50, 55% intensity. So anywhere between 40% to 55% effort, right? And then contract, relax, manual stretching. This is where you stretch into a position. So for example, if you were to hold a stretch like this for your chest and you have your arm on like a doorway, what you would do is you would contract moderately for about 10 seconds and then you'd relax. And so you're putting a contraction into the stretch and then you're totally relaxing. When you do that, what you're doing is you're causing the nervous system that's saying, I don't want you to go any further because we're not used to going further. So this is a great thing to do for tissues that feel really tight. You contract for 10 seconds moderately. It only requires like 10, 20% effort. You're not like trying to tear the wall down or anything like this. So nice, easy contraction, and then you relax again. And what will happen is because you voluntarily contracted, your nervous system will start stopping involuntarily contracting the tissue, and it lets the tissue go further. And now you're actually getting a better stretch. You're getting greater mobility. So it's a brilliant, brilliant strategy for stretching. But if you do too much of it, it is getting into the degenerative stimulus. So great idea, but realize that you don't want to do a crazy amount of it and based on your adaptation. So progressive overload, passive stretching. This is where someone's basically stretching you, but they're pushing you a little bit past what you're used to. Neuromuscular retraining, proprioceptive-based neurological fatigue. Basically what this one is where you are really focused. This is something we use a lot of in our training systems, which is basically you're heavily focused on the alignment of your body while doing a mix of all the different types of things that you see on this list. But you're very heavily focused on like the skill of maintaining body alignment while doing exercise, which is very much secret sauce for having amazing functionality and longevity in your body and quality of life. Then we get into aerobic zone 2 and 4 interval training. This is basically higher intensity aerobic activity where you feel like you're at about 55% effort up to about 75 to even 80% effort. Light resistance training. So this is where you just do very lightweight training. And the value of what you should be thinking while you're seeing this is thinking about the types of physical activity you're doing and thinking about how you can make it better. In other words, if you're someone that's starting to get into the end of this list here with activities, you want to make sure you're balancing and doing regenerative with your degenerative throughout your week, because that way you're going to get your body to recover better and basically feel more like a kid. So now we're looking at BFR resistance training. You already learned about what that is. Now we're just doing BFR training with higher intensity, aerobic powers. And then, again, you don't have to do all of these. This is just giving you an idea and thinking about what is the exercise I do and where's it at on the list and how much breakdown am I creating in my body versus what are the things I could be doing to improve the regeneration of my body to feel even better. That's your takeaway for this. Aerobic power zone 4 and 5, peak duration. This is where you're doing high intense cardio until you get really fatigued. Moderate resistance training to fatigue. Now it's starting to lift moderate to heavy weights. And then maximum concentric strength training. So this is where you're going to where 65 to 100% of your 1 rep max. That means that you are the most that you can lift, the part where your muscle is shortening while you're lifting the weight. So like standing up from a squat or pulling towards you in a row or pushing away from you in a push. All those examples of the muscle shortening while you're doing the exercise, and you do it high intense, that's towards the top of the list for breakdown. Degenerative stimulus is good, but just remember, it's like taking a high dose medicine for exercise, for healthy activity, but you don't want to do too much of it. Last 2 on the list, explosive PNF or plyometrics. What this is like jumping exercises, like which by the way is one of the #1 things for osteoporosis and osteopenia. For bone density increase, it's recommended to do high impact activity. But the interesting thing about that recommendation is most people are totally ill-equipped to be able to handle high impact exercise. because they don't have biomechanical optimization, because they don't have enough adaptation to be doing it in the first place. So you go to do think about all these in-home programs that are sold, all these Insanity, P90X, all this stuff that's been sold. The physical therapy offices have absolutely loved these program developers, because like 70% or more of the people who do those programs end up in the physical therapy office, because your body's ill-equipped to do that, because it's at the end of the list for degeneration and makes a huge impact of degenerative stimulus in your body. And lastly, eccentric strength training. So eccentric strength training, which is important, you want to do this, but maximal eccentric, this is where you go and do your lift with, and I'll close out this list because that's the last item on our list. So for example, if you do a row, right? So a row, the resistance attached there, and you do a row and you control the most that you can in that weight, where you can't pull it this way anymore, but you're able to control it this way, just for like 1 rep or your 2 max reps. That's a very high stimulus intensity, because it causes the tissues to tear apart microscopically, ideally microscopically, right? So as long as you don't do it too intense, that type of exercise produces a very high stimulus. Again, that could be good for you. That's really good at preventing the tissues from having tears, unexpected tears, by doing eccentric strength training. But you have to understand, when you start doing these kind of strength training practices, it's like one of the highest stimuluses, so it's going to really prevent your body from breakdown or injury. But if you do too much of it, then you're going to get excess damage in your body, right? So Patricia will drop the link and give you access to that to the document I shared with you today, and then you'll have recordings from this that we'll send to you. So you'll have everything I went over today. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, VIPs first, for questions. So any questions, VIPs, that you have, or any comments, anything you'd like to share, I would love to chat with you. And while you're doing that, VIPs, while you're thinking about your questions, and also non-VIPs, so our audience members, please feel welcome to raise your hand as well. And we'll call on our VIPs first, because we give them exclusive access to questions first. But I am going to go through the chat here and see any questions that I should answer. Okay, so if I walk for 20 minutes under the sun, that's awesome, by the way, really good, really good. There's a lot of regenerative stimulus in that. And do some exercises which are light on my knees, as I'm 54 and doctor has told me I've got runner's knee, osteoarthritis. But how do I know how much is just appropriate for me? Think about what you can do, right? So Archana, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Think about what you can do. What can you do, right? What can you do that you're capable of, that you feel like it's in your performance? In other words, a squat or a lunge, or attaching a band to your foot and doing a leg press, the many exercises that you can do, and think about the performance. And then if you're feeling injury, you start at your adaptation. So you don't start at what you can't use. You kind of have an idea for what that is, and then you start at what you can do. So you're only going to do about 35% effort of your performance capacity, right? And it's kind of understanding that gap. That's understanding that gap is what. And by the way, osteoarthritis, one thing to really help with that is strength training. You want some stress and load, because the friction and the stimulus from exercise actually helps prevent additional cartilage breakdown. So by having some stress, your body actually secretes substances that cause the cartilage to not break down. It counteracts and fights against what is breaking the cartilage down. So so movement doesn't necessarily break it down unless it's in excess. I got this body ache 2 days before, but now I'm fine, so I should continue with the same. This much is my threshold. Yes, you have the right ideas now. Yes, and then I walk 10,000 steps a day. Is that too much? That's a good question. It's like, okay, so Christine, so her question was, I walk 10,000 steps a day. Is that too much? Okay, so how do we figure that out? Well, if Christine was used to walking 1,000 steps a day for the last year, let's say, and now you go to 10,000, yeah, that's way too much. But if you're kind of like, you're like 5,000 or 6,000, you've built up to this 10,000 thing and you feel good, Well, you're actually within your adaptation. You're not at your performance capacity, right? Your performance capacity, if you've really adapted to that, might be more towards like 30,000 steps a day, right? So it all depends on where you're coming from, what is your body used to? What is your body used to in terms of stress? That's your key element for knowing how much you should push and how much you shouldn't push, is what are you used to? And then kind of using those charts I showed you to find where you should be at with an occasional push towards that performance capacity. And with that, let's turn it over to actually, let's do one more. How do you know which regenerative exercise is best suited to recover you from degenerative exercise? It's typically the one you most likely to do. Like, oh, I could do a contrast shower. I take a shower every day. So I'll do the heat and the cold, and great. And then I can do some light stretching. So I'll do the contrast shower and some light stretching, and that's easy. So the first thing you always is psychological. The physical stuff doesn't matter. The best plan in the world is only as good as what is followed. So psychological first. So, what is the thing that you'll do on a regular basis? It's Janie asking this. Yeah. So whatever you're most likely to do. And if Janie, you follow stuff really well. So the best thing for you to do is to do a combination of. So the heat can help warm you up, and then you can do some stretching. Now the tissues are all warmed up, and you could do some light aerobic activity combined with the heat. And then you would go in and do some light stretching, and then finish with the cold. So then it's cutting off the inflammation, right? So that would be is like stacking those. Think about warm up, stretch, cool down. Think about it like that. And then maybe you could finish, if you have the time, you can finish with meditation. Now you're using multiple components, just like we would use like strength and conditioning and stretching in one session. You can do that same type of thing with regenerative activity. And now let's turn it to Diane. Hello.
Hi. So you kind of answered part of that, but going back to degenerative versus regenerative. So as you're moving along that spectrum and trying to increase muscle mass, just tips for, is it your own gauge as far as how much degenerative versus how much regenerative? You made a few comments in terms of balancing, but what are your thoughts or tips about that?
Yeah, I'm going to actually go back into sharing from this 1 second, because I think it'll be best if I show with this to create the example. Let's go backwards. So depending on where you're at, like beginner, intermediate, depending on type of physical activity, let's say like beginner. So if you do some exercise over here where you kind of really push yourself, it was good. You had a healthy exercise, but you're soreness is good the next day. It's part of the training process sometimes. But if you really had kind of really pushed it more, and you felt like you trained more towards like what you could do, not kind of just in your moderate, but what you could do, then you'd want to be more thorough on the regenerative stimulus. So depending on how much you're pushing that degen stimulus depends on how much you want to push that regen stimulus. So if you did some degen stimulus, so like a moderate strength training, a little bit of aerobic activity afterward, or some stretching, nothing too fatiguing for you, then you might match the next day with a more moderate regenerative stimulus. So something that's like one of the light activities and the stretching and those other things, you might match it with a more with something lower, in this case, lower or more intense on the degenerative stimulus category, right? Let's say you've just really pushed it, right? You've done like the most intense CrossFit workout you've done in the last 2 years, and you played around over here. Well, for you, you're going to do like meditation, and maybe only the contrast shower, no more movement needed. You did enough of it, let your body rest. So you match the intensity of the degen with the intensity, if you will, of the regenerative. How low on the spectrum of regeneration is it? So that's what you'd want. That's what you want to do. Does that answer the question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's pretty helpful. I know the issue sometimes is like that day, you've done something, but you felt like I felt pretty good about it. But then the next day, I was like, whoa. So maybe I should have done some regenerative things that day, or, that day before. But mentally, I wasn't there. I was thinking, oh, no, I'm okay. Or I've walked, for example, afterwards thinking, oh, I'm just going to take a nice slow walk with the dog or something like that. But it really wasn't the appropriate regenerative thing, probably. And so it's just, as and it's also knowing yourself, because I think I'm a little slower to recover. And sometimes mentally I'm thinking I'm not, I'm okay, I'm recovered, but I'm not. So yeah. So those are good tips though, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Another way is, remember, the 72-hour rule is a really good one. So if we start pushing in a second and third day, now, man, I'm really fatigued still from that workout I did. Okay, what's the answer? The answer is really getting one of those more complex regen sessions in. In other words, a meditation, a contrast shower, some light stretching, some low aerobic activity, and you do that, right? And as a VIP, then of course you're going to do your mobility solution, so mobility training in the areas where you have greatest restriction, because it's going to create a alignment in your body. Because oftentimes what happens when we really push our body with exercise, then the most restricted tissues restrict the most. So in other words, yeah, the areas where your tissues are the tightest, they'll also go tightest the most. So we want to focus on and as a VIP, to the actual degree and which mobility solutions to do. So you would work that into the game, and then you kind of wait for like, okay, I'm definitely really recovered. You can feel that energy level and everything different. I'm ready to start pushing again. Yeah.
Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, you're welcome. And up next is Chris. Hello, Chris. Welcome. I'm sorry, Chris. Oh, there you go. Your audio is not on yet. I sent you a link there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Two questions. One, to be clear regarding, so am I to be working to, exercising to capacity? And does that mean to the point that I am like, okay, I'm taxed out? Or am I stopping just short of that? I'm not clear.
Yeah. It's best to stop just short of that until, like, when you're a beginner, intermediate, you don't need to go any more than that. The thing that's going to get you, let the thing that's going to get you to advance be the consistency, and always stop before you're tapped out. It's because of the Pareto Principle. Like 20% of what you do is going to give you 80% of that last bit is not going to give you that much. It can create sympathetic. Okay. So your autonomic nervous system of your body sets the tone for whether you're more in a fight or flight state or whether you're more in a rest and digest state. So if you do too much high intensity exercise, along with tissue inflammation and the immune system and the way it's affected, your nervous system will also start to freak out more. And so what happens is your nervous system and your immune system gets more taxed and stressed, because the nervous system is on high alert because it sees your physical exercise as a threat. And so it elevates your body tone, increased heart rate. You don't sleep as well, all these things. So you don't want to overtrain for those reasons. And your immune system also is the major factor that helps the tissues regenerate. So you don't want to stress those systems too much. You kind of want to train them. It's like teaching them, like, if you're going to teach someone a good subject, you don't want to give them too much information all at one time. Try to give it to them slower, which sometimes I'm not the best at doing. I like to give everything, but you slowly train the system with extreme consistency, so that, because your goal is adaptation, your goal isn't performance. If you improve your adaptation, then by the way of that, your performance will increase. That's really the secret, is by improving the adaptation, the performance. You never really have to play that much in performance. What the best thing to do is let your body and your mind say, I want to do the performance. I really, not because my friend is getting leaner than me, not because I feel like I should, not because of any other external factors, only because of I feel a desire to do that for my own personal reasons. That's when you know it's a good idea to do some higher elevated, more pushing of your body. Because not only do we have physical factors, we have mental, emotional factors that play into the whole recovery process as well. And when you make exercise feel like a threat to your nervous system, you're going to end up with other negative results beyond just the physical. So we have to approach it from both the mental, emotional, and the physical standpoint as well. Leading back to clarity and simple answer, play more in the moderate, easy range. Let the performance come when you feel internal drive to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And my second question is about repetition of like lighter weights versus, shorter amount with heavier weights.
Yeah, it's best for a long time to train lighter weight, light to moderate weight. And the reason why, so let's just talk about the positive effects first. So let's remove everything and just, when you lift heavier weight, you're going to turn on more muscle fibers, you're going to gain more strength, you're going to build more muscle, and you're going to build more bone density. That's what you will happen. If you train with lighter weights, you're going to get more endurance as for longer periods of time, not the same reps, but more reps, lighter weight. You're going to get a little bit more endurance. You're going to train more stamina into the tissues, but you won't get as much of that strength training effect. But in going heavy before you're ready and you don't have perfect body alignment, then you're also going to cause excess joint stress. We can get into the mental, emotional threat from the exercise, and then additional inflammation. And then we start getting into all those other things. And mechanically, what happens is usually it's very difficult to maintain perfect body alignment when we get fatigued with heavy load. So what will happen is you'll train your neurological system to use other muscles that you're not supposed to be using when you do that activity. So this is called a compensatory pattern or compensations, or in the science world, we call this pathokinematics, which means you're literally developing pathologies in your movement function, which will lead to ultimate decline. So although that heavier weight produces this great result, we need to be very careful on how we get there, so that when we arrive at that heavier, higher intensity, we're doing it in such a way that it's still producing a therapeutic effect, which means it's reinforcing body alignment. It's not about the performance of the exercise. It's about how aligned can you keep your body while doing that higher intensity exercise. And that's the paradigm change.
Right. And so in thinking with that, because at times it's like, I may start with a heavier weight and then need to go to a lighter, or actually I do the other way. It's like, oh, okay. So do you have any thoughts around that?
Yep, absolutely. So good, thorough warm up. So in other words, light aerobic activity, moving the body in easy motions that feel good for at least 5 minutes before you start getting into the higher intensity activity. Once you start getting into higher intensity activity, what you should do is use light, moderate weights to practice the motion that you're going to do with heavy weight. Do the heavy weight, and there's going to be a much smaller window of being able to do the heavy weight with positive results than you'd think. Typically, like my guess for you would be about 4 sets on different exercise with heavy weight is going to be about your maximal returns. Everything else after that would be done with lighter, lower load, additional fat burning, additional stamina and endurance type of training after that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Are you attending the Full Body Fix Challenge?
I am
Awesome.
very excited.
Great. Me too. It's going to be fantastic. Any other questions, comments, or positive shares from our VIPs or our audience members today? Oh, thank you, Christine. Yes, and you're welcome. Lucy. Hi, Lucy. How are you? You're muted, Lucy.
I mean, yeah. My balance exercises have been really helping me. Because doing some of the exercises, I was already starting to realize I was actually, my muscles were actually, I was noticing changes, and they weren't the muscles that were supposed to be being used, and it was part of my balance. So I had to stop doing classes so I could work on my balance exercises primarily, because my biomechanical had gotten so bad over the years that I hadn't noticed.
Mm.
Because my body had changed, and I tore my tendons, and my ankle had done it, and my tendons had changed, and my ankles were rolling, and I didn't know why they were rolling. And now I changed that, and then I changed my balance and my biomechanical with all my facial surgeries. I didn't know my neck was being pushed forward. So it's been a lot of those changes and trying to do all those exercises. And you, I've helped a lot with your program. So
Uh,
years of going to doctors with balance problems and getting all these tests, and none of them helped me. They did all the tests, negative. There was nothing they could do for me. So I basically, with you, I've actually been helped. Finally, after like 15 years. So it's great. So thank you for everything. So
uh,
I'll be doing more of the exercises as I get better.
Lucy, we love you. We really love you, and we're so happy to see your transformation. And you know, that's really what our VIP Platinum program is for no matter what is going on in the difficulties that you have in the beginning, is that we have those private sessions in our VIP Platinum to be able to get you moving forward. And Patricia and I are involved in some very elite level, like science communities and business networking organizations. And we're actually sharing the positive changes that we've seen in you since the beginning with one of our naturopathic medical doctor friends. And so we want you to know, Lucy, that you're an inspiration to us, because what you just shared, yeah, we brought you the physical and the science and the strategy and all this stuff. Kudos to us, but kudos to you, because it's not easy. And you didn't say, oh, I'm going to quit, I can't do it, I can't. No, you followed the system, you're doing the work, you're super consistent, and because of that, you've gotten the results. So much love for you, Lucy, and we're really proud of you.
Yeah.
I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon.
And John, hello, sir, welcome.
Hello. Hi. This has been extremely interesting to me. I've exercised. Well, I'm not exercising a lot now because I'm injured and I'm having a hard time. But I didn't know 95% of what you said today. So this is kind of mind-boggling. God, it would have probably been nice to know this 70 or 80 years ago. So I'm assuming you're selling something, and and I'm signed up for this thing that you have coming up, starting I guess the 21st or something like that. Yeah. So where do I go from here to find out more about this?
Well, you'll learn all about that in the full body fix and in the last session, especially, and then we'll give opportunities throughout. But Patricia could if you want to, she can message you here. She can get in touch with you. So I have a team that can help educate you on that. But yeah, after this, we have a VIP training system. So we call it our VIP Mastermind for those who aren't in it. We call it VIP Mastermind. Once you're in, you become part of the VIP family. And so basically we have an entire structure. This whole thing isn't really about, yes, we run a business. Yes, I like money. But for me, this is about my passion of reading my first exercise science textbook at 12 years old and having a passion and a dream to really transform people's life. That's what this is about for me. So it's not about like pushing people to do things they shouldn't do or selling crap that they don't need to buy. So, but we do have something called a VIP Mastermind, where we train you through an entire system of biomechanical optimization, and all the things I talked about today, we implement into the system, and we continually educate you on utilizing really everything we talked about today. And we have a whole training structure and an ongoing training path to assist you with the complexities of like the biomechanical stuff that I talked about today. So yeah, we'd love for you to become VIP, but yeah, Patricia can message you here. I'm sure she's already messaged you privately in the chat. If you look at the chat, she'll give you information on that.
I just dropped a link for the It's All About You, and it's a group semi-private session with Robbie where he explains everything about the fitness doctor and what we do. So it's right in the chat, John. And if you have any difficulties, I would drop my email and you can message me anytime.
Oh, I was, let me see. Yeah, I'm still not muted. I was reading this thing and I didn't realize you were talking to me until just then. Oh. But you gave a link here for me to click, and I'll go ahead and click that link.
Any other questions, comments, positive shares before we log off from today's Full Body Fix coaching show? Awesome. Okay. Well, I wish you to make it a wonderful weekend and put into practice what we talked about here. And the big takeaway is in the Full Body Fix event, which starts May 21st for our non-VIPs. Of course, our VIPs can attend, but for our non-VIPs, the next way to start really learning about how to apply all this stuff is at that Full Body Fix on May 21st. As a VIP, we talk about this stuff all the time, multiple times per week in session. We're with you every step of the way. And for our VIPs, if there's anything specific that I talked about today that you would like more help on, let us know, and we're here to guide you through that. Much love to you. Make it a great weekend, and we'll see you very soon. Bye for now.
And we are going to leave the meeting open for just a little while so you have the opportunity to catch up with the links. Okay, so I will see you next week, May 21st in the Full Body Fix, and also in It's All About You meeting. Have a happy Friday, not Friday, Saturday.